On today's show, we are back. The AI Business Podcast is back after a long summer. Do you miss us? I know, I say this for everybody. We miss you, the listeners. Joining me, as always, is, I think you're still the global editor, right, Max Molax?
Yeah, still. They haven't fired me. Still here, Tian, yes.
Still the reporter of AI Business, our dutiful reporter who just sent me a 24-second video to edit. He's Ben Wadecki.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're back, baby. It's good to be back. Can I say back anymore?
Back to the future. Back to the podcast.
And of course, you're just the editor now, Sebastian.
I write as well, occasionally. Increasingly less. My life seems to be endless meetings. So if any AI company is listening that can create a fake version of me, a digital double, that can just sit in meetings and nod, please contact me.
Give me one sentence or like one thing that summarizes your summer.
So I feel like a summer break is meant to be refreshing, and I feel haggard. I've aged about 30 years in the past 3 months. I feel like I have kids that I'm not seeing.
From your sperm donation 20 years ago, yeah.
Right. Leave us a nice iTunes review, but do not contact me, son. That's my update on the summer.
Okay. Yeah, great. Ben?
Speaking of family, I did see my family, but in terms of a rest, did we have a rest? Probably not.
Did we have a summer?
Probably not.
Well, the things are open up. You guys are going out, and Ben, don't lie. I follow you on Instagram. You've been doing a lot of indoor activity with your friends.
I've been getting into Warhammer. For those of you who don't know, Warhammer is...
What do you mean, for those who don't know? Nobody knows this.
For those of you with a life.
It gives me something to do in the evenings, which isn't working or studying, so...
And okay, of course, Max, summarize your summer for us.
It was not a summer of love. Like long-term listeners of the podcast know that I believed that this summer is going to be very different from last summer. That, like all of the energy, sexual and otherwise, pent up, that it's going to get released, and it wasn't. It really wasn't. It's a bit of a wet blanket this summer. There's nothing going on, and I just got my bike back, but so hopefully I can at least ride again.
What about you, Tian? No, what about you, Tian? Don't you try and get away from this?
My summer's good. My son turned 1. If you care, I realize none of you care. People don't have kids or don't have girlfriends, just don't care about, father and son relationship. I get it. I was like that. But he turned 1. It was like probably my proudest accomplishment that he's still alive and walking. So,
what's a girlfriend?
You know when Max makes you dress up?
I knew that was for something.
All right. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about the one thing you guys have been watching a lot more news than I have because I've been busy, watching my son growing into a man. But
loser.
But yeah, but we were all kind of aware there's so much going on. I mean, the summer has been kind of slow, and it's gonna pick up in the fall. But there are some stories that kind of worth talking about, right? So why don't we also just go around and talk about the summer story that we follow, or it can be just something that you watch last week, So why don't we go around and don't take too much time, and we can have a little discussion afterwards. And this time we'll start with Max.
All right. Well, it's more of a trend, right? That kind of like started manifesting strongly this summer. So we've heard about the Omniverse for a long time. But now it's finally real. It's getting serious corporate backing, like Nvidia, which is obviously like the world's biggest kind of like AI company now. Like they do hardware, they do software, and they kind of like seriously going strong into this Omniverse thing. And they have the muscle to actually make it a reality. So the idea is 3D environments for large businesses. I think most interested is manufacturing and logistics. So basically, you recreate your factories, you recreate your warehouses in 3D, and then you can do interesting things to them. So basically, all of your sensor information feeds these 3D models, and you have representations of your real facilities. Don't have to go visit. You know what's going on. Other people have started, embracing it as well. Google this week has launched its own digital twin service. And again, like when everybody's doing it, you realize that, yeah, this is definitely a business. This is a thing that we're going to see more in the future. But what I like about the Omniverse is obviously that it has grown out of big video game worlds and just generally video gaming. And it's just like, like the first experiments with this stuff where they were probably, you've heard about Second Life, for example. Second Life was not just a game, it was a serious academic research project. It taught people to buy digital assets online and pay real money, unfortunately, but it also showed us that, there's places you can take these virtual worlds and people are even going to buy virtual property.
With all that, here's a question. Here's a yes or no question for you, Max. Because this kind of stuff is only going to get better, right? So, are we in a simulations or not?
I think we are. I think it might be the cycle. I think once you become technologically advanced enough, you can create these virtual worlds, populate them with little AI programs, and eventually they're going to evolve to the state of kind of like reasonable beings. Maybe, but it is an interesting question.
Yeah.
So I can loop that back to Nvidia because I asked Jensen Huang if what he thinks about if we're in a simulation once, and he said, "I don't care." Which I think is a fair response, especially if you're a billionaire, because if it's a simulation or it's real, he's done pretty well and he's happy. He's now a Time Man of the Year or 100 most influential people.
Well, one of the 100. I don't think he's the top one.
Yeah, but he gets to be on the cover.
He has the best kitchen out of
He has the
everybody,
best kitchen.
out of all the 100.
That doesn't exist. Yes.
Yeah.
Or does it?
No, does it? No one knows what's real with Nvidia. I think, Max is right that there's this really fascinating overlap between video games where people paid to escape into realities and have fun in realities to potentially less fun corporate but kind of more exciting from a science perspective corporate overtaking of that and turning it into a digital twin of the real world. Like another overlap is Unity. So they're a video game engine, which is essentially they sell a pack of physics and how worlds work to game developers, and game developers can make a game off of it. Now they're saying, how about we sell it instead to AI people and robot people so they can just run simulations of the real world and test out how an AI would work without actually putting like a Tesla on the road that will kill people.
Yeah, and it's going to become more important. And I've seen some opinions out there. This is kind of like, this is a viewpoint now that we actually belong in virtuality, that the real world sucks. And it's just like the sooner we can like virtualize ourselves and kind of like escape all this drudgery, and just live somewhere which is fun, which is created entirely by people, for people, and like this kind of never-ending wonderland. There's an opinion that we should be moving in this direction as fast as possible.
Except, of course, that the people that will be holding the keys to those kingdoms will be the people that have proven themselves to be so good at running social media networks and search engines and advertising platforms.
Yeah, so one thing that I picked up on it was that over the summer I actually had the chance of speaking with a digital twin firm company called Matterport, who are doing something in this space regarding the real estate market. So what they're doing is they're basically scanning properties, and you can basically view a property digitally without having to go there. Pretty good during COVID. They've actually gone public recently, and they're actually doing okay, which is quite surprising. And they're doing a lot, and they want to move on to it. They called it the metaverse rather than the metaverse, which is slightly cringy, but at the same time quite funny. So yeah, I think this is a space to watch, and I think Omniverse is something that we're quietly looking at in terms of that's kind of cool, but let's see how it goes. I don't think we're in a simulation, because if we are, I'm being incredibly bullied. So there we go. This summer has been, for me anyway, inundated with autonomous vehicle stuff, but I want to focus on something that I actually got to try out. So I was at an event with Huawei, and I met some journos from Macworld, who are nice people, and they let me try out Facebook Ray-Bans, which is genuinely a thing. So basically it's smart glasses that don't look like smart glasses, and they're actually kind of cool, but they're not that great. The actual premise of them, the speakers are just above the kind of ear ridges, so they're quite loud. As I'm sat next to Max could probably hear if I was playing music. The cameras themselves, you only have a small white light above the kind of ridge of your glasses to see if you're recording. It has like a 5 megapixel camera, not great, but for a pair of sunglasses, that's the best on the market. And you can't really tell there's a camera in there. They just look like a pair of Ray-Bans. And if you want bifocal ones, so if you wear glasses like we do, $200 extra. So, Mr. Zuckerberg, how do you sleep at night?
Well, is it an innovative piece of tech? How about that? It's yeah. So we've got the Snap Spectacles, right? Though that's the same thing, except Snap Spectacles were much more open about. Yeah, and they were much more open about. It's like a very clear. There's a camera here. You had obviously Google Glass, which had more innovation on the display years ago. Maybe it looked terrible, but it's more innovation on display. This is just a camera in glasses and a speaker. I mean, is that the best we can do in 2021? And then, like you said, there's a little light. You can cover that little light. They say that violates the terms of service, but I mean, that's the dumbest thing ever. It's just a creepy way of filming people with your face, but you're not even filming them well.
Yeah, and I don't know why sort of like mega corporations are so wedded to this idea. What's in it for them? You know, like you can't advertise, you know, like what on these glasses. So why do they want the video footage? Do they want it for analytics? Why does Snap? Why does Facebook? Why do countless others want these video feeds?
It's domain acquisition of grabbing space before someone else comes up with a way to take this. So it's the same as reason why Facebook bought WhatsApp. They didn't know how to make money off WhatsApp. They still don't really know how to make money off WhatsApp. But they're like, oh, people were spending time on this thing. We should own it so someone else can't own it and make money off it and collect data. We're in this very weird phase where no one knows what to do after phones. And people keep trying different things. And, you know, they've got wearables. Wearables are a perfectly sustainable business for Apple and Android, but it's clearly not the next big thing.
These ones have no Facebook logo on them. They are advertised. If I looked at anyone, the guy wearing them, they are just Ray-Bans for all intents and purposes. And the fact that, you know, the Snapchat ones are discernibly Snapchat. I mean, the Gen 1 ones were bright yellow. You know, you could tell they were Snapchat. I think the idea of disguising them is kind of kind of cool, at the same time creepy. Yeah, it's a weird frontier, like you said.
Okay, so Ben, what you're saying is there's not one part of that glasses that can kind of wow you and say, okay, this can be cool if they master it. No?
Nothing wowed me about them when I tried them.
I'll tell you what, bone conducting audio is much more interesting than strapping a camera to your face. Having headphones on your glasses by default is actually a wonderful idea because it doesn't invite anybody's privacy. If anything, it's privacy preserving technology. Nobody will even know that you're getting sounds beamed into your head, and it is beautiful, and I would want to see more of it.
But the audio sucked when I tried it.
Well, also I think the scary and maybe not so scary part is that people are looking at the glasses again. No pun intended. It's almost like the Google Glass was shot off the side for a second, and everybody's like, you know what? We really couldn't find anything else to put our money, VC money in. That's actually all go back to innovative glasses.
But we talked about this before. So basically, Facebook never seen a bad idea that it didn't like and it wouldn't run, and then a couple of years wouldn't try to run again. So Facebook goes through these cycles. When the first generation of a product, you know, annoys everybody and is kind of like infringes on privacy, regulators are angry, customers are angry, and then they quietly roll out the same things 2 years later when people have readjusted, you know, like and they try it again, and suddenly, yeah, it's suddenly okay. Like the automatic tagging of pictures. You know, when they rolled it out originally, everybody was shocked and appalled, and everybody said this was a very, very bad thing. Right now, I think pretty much like there might be a couple of EU countries that still kind of like don't let you do that, but everywhere else, you know, automated photo tagging is a standard feature. We don't think it's evil anymore.
So to be continued. We'll keep an eye on these glasses.
Actually, fine, you know, for spectacled man to talk about glasses, yes.
So journalists out there will know the special 3 words, which is learn to code. And it's a meme. Every time journalists get laid off, because this is a dying industry, people that hate journalists, which is a growing group of people, message them learn to code as a kind of why didn't you, you know, it's almost a joke based on a article from the past of like, when jobs are lost to the modern industry, why not learn to code? Unfortunately, learning to code is itself potentially a dying art because of Microsoft, GitHub, and OpenAI. And so there's 2 very exciting interrelated products here, AI Copilot and Codex. Microsoft, GitHub, OpenAI together have built AI Copilot, which is built off of Codex, which has also come out separately. It's very confusing. But in essence, these are AI systems for doing coding. So it will code instead of a human. You think of it a little bit like autocomplete on Microsoft Word, where you almost it will try and fill in a sentence for you. This will try and fill in the coding. It's very early days. It's very basic. It's got a lot of biases that are worrying. It also uses other people's code and copyrights code because, as we all know, AI is just a hall of mirrors. It doesn't come up with anything. It just takes other people's things and spits it back at them, and people go, wow, that's very impressive. The advantage of that is there is a lot of coding, day-to-day coding, where you have these highly qualified, highly paid people doing really mundane, writing the same task out again and again and again. Theoretically, that part of it could be taken by AI, which would be great because it frees up people to do other things and work on more genocides in Myanmar. But
so angry.
Me, no, I'm at peace from my lovely summer. No, so the worry, if you're a coder, is that finally, after years of coding other people out of jobs, you are being coded out of your job. I think that's a very long way off, especially for the more upper echelons of creative things. And you still need to be a coder to know how to shepherd this machine and shepherd this system. Just the average person can't just be like, I want to have a website and it'll build a website. You have to give it prompts in its own language. But one day, eventually, it'll get to that point, and that means the great job of the future for all us journalists is being taken away from us. So we're stuck to Substacks.
No, but it's already happening. So basically, the ultimate dream is interacting with these systems is natural language. You talk with the coding system, you explain to it like you would explain to a human coder what it needs to do, and it conducts the work. And OpenAI has already done like small demos, like making this work. There was like it can create a website. You describe a website in a couple of sentences, and it will create that website. And I think, this is something that us kind of like people who cannot code are looking forward to, but like people who can code and who make a living coding, I think they would probably be quite afraid of it.
So I'm stuck current. For those who don't know, I'm currently studying an MSc in digital journalism outside of my AI business role, and one of our modules is learning how to code. And for someone who has no idea what they're doing, it is extremely difficult. But for someone who writes every single day, it's not. I wouldn't consider it currently an essential skill. And especially if you're so terrified of losing your job because of this system, then maybe you need to kind of consider retraining, but not so much as that, just general skills. I think focusing on one thing in particular is kind of wasted time and effort, really.
Well, no, or is it a path to mastery and kind of like, ultimate craftsmanship? Don't they say that you need to practice something for 40 years to become a master?
10,000 hours is the...
Well, I think that's been
completely
debunked.
bullshit,
Kinda.
but it's been...
Yeah, that's totally BS, yeah.
I master everything in 5 minutes. No, I mean, it's the current like community, coder community reaction to these things is mostly, wow, this is really cool and amazing. Because I think most people understand this is a long way off and know that it's not going to threaten their jobs anytime soon. But it is a glimpse at what will come. And it's also a glimpse at, they put these, both of these companies working together, put these platforms out, openly admitting, oh, it plagiarizes, oh, it has lots of bias issues. Well, I guess we fix that later. If you have any ideas how we could fix this, get in contact.
I feel like that's probably going to be replacing maybe some jobs, but it's not going to take away all the coders' job. And for the foreseeable future, we still have to deal with tech bros, rolling up and down the streets and thinking that they're the best thing in the world. So as much as I want to see that future, I don't think it's happening soon, or it's not going to be the skill that happened to journalists when they were, when they got in trouble because they don't know how to use social media. You know what I mean? Like that happened in Page One, 20 years ago in New York Times and all that stuff. So I don't know.
Like for me, it's interesting because GitHub is obviously a kind of like a respected name. There's a lot of goodwill for GitHub, so we'll see. It's just like if anybody's gonna do it, I think GitHub is a good name to do it because there's a lot of trust. They have enabled the industry. Coders do like the platform. It is the de facto standard for posting your code online. So probably couldn't have happened to better people. Like with the support of Microsoft. But we'll see. But if they go off track, this can very easily reverse.
Well, I mean, it's also Microsoft flexing their muscles of, they bought GitHub in 2018 for 7.5 billion, and they've essentially acquired the soul of OpenAI, which, listen to previous episodes, read the website for more of the story on that. But OpenAI can't do anything without first offering it to Microsoft, and they're incredibly closely aligned despite. Oh, and exchange for a lot of money. Obviously, some people at OpenAI quit because of it, but this is Microsoft saying, look, we know a lot about AI. We employ a lot of AI people. We have all this data, which we acquired from GitHub, all this coding data. We also have this like hotshot startup in our back pocket. Let's bring these things all together. And what OpenAI did for language, natural language processing with GPT-3, essentially do that for coding. I think it's an incredibly exciting, interesting development that will probably take a lot longer to actually have a real world impact than they'd like you to think, but will definitely have a real world impact.
Second, Max points about GitHub, shout out to Roland Sabel, our one-time Google insider. He essentially he didn't really apply for a job. He just put his codes on GitHub. He put his homework from college, university, as you guys call it, on GitHub, and he got hired, and recruiters just reach out and say, "Let look good." And I think that's that's so far that's the good thing about GitHub being in the center of all this. And rounding up all this is like our kind of not the biggest, but the one that got the most media attention is we covered space race before. We cover how China is working with Russia and how America has this renewed energy, like we just need to go back to Mars and all these private companies. And suddenly this race kind of take a turn, and it kind of become a race for the billionaires to flex their muscle and say, hey, we got to space first and we can commercialize this. And I never know that it's been Richard Branson's dream to go up to space, and and he may or may not have faked his entry video when he like ride a bike and high five with people and he just went onto space right afterwards. They might have recorded that video previously, so they staged a bunch of stuff, and it's almost like for Richard Branson's sake and for Jeff Bezos, they are trying to put themselves on space and kind of pen themselves as this superhuman, like, hey, I'm not just rich, but I'm rich and I'm courageous and I'm going on this. Yes, Ben, you just raised your hand.
Yeah, it's my dream for Richard Branson to go to space and stay there.
No, but it's like, allow me to be pedantic. The bastard didn't even make it to space. None of them, like Virgin Galactic, is not a space machine. It's a near space machine, but essentially upper layers of the atmosphere. It's not space.
Yeah. Correct. So technically, Branson didn't go to space, although his trip was about a week prior to Bezos' trip. But Bezos went way deeper into, went way
not
higher,
space.
I guess.
Yeah.
The latest turn, of course, is that we also saw that there's a commercial aircraft that just went up into space, and this is not just gonna be like a 20-minute thing. It's gonna be in space for 3 days, carrying 4 passengers, and this is the SpaceX version of this, and causing $20 million, or is it $200 million? Who's keeping track? Causing a lot of money. But is I guess the benefit the pro is that they're raising money for St. Jude Hospital. It's a children's hospital in America, so they're trying to raise money.
But surely you can buy several children's hospitals for the cost of the rocket.
Yeah.
That's where I'll leave you.
Not in America.
I'm just giving you the background, and I'll leave the ethical conversation. We can have, or we can talk about it right now. But I'm just letting you know that suddenly it's kind of about space tech advancement, but it's also about big tech companies making money off of sending people to space.
$200 million is like the average American's deductible on their health insurance, isn't it?
Yeah, it's somewhere between $5,000 and $200.
I want to jump in here because there's somebody else that's just entered the space race pretty much overnight before recording, and that is the bearded wizard that is Steve Wozniak, who has now set up a space firm to essentially clean up the waste in space. So when you think of you're going into space and everyone thinks it's a clean break, it's not. There's so much crap up there from US missions and satellites, just general natural
old
debris.
Soviet weird experimental shit still flying out
with
there.
people in them.
There is a very good anime about this.
But my question is, do we think that, number one, is space race kind of like hit like a plateau and like, okay, we don't know what else to do anymore, we're just gonna commercialize all these spacecrafts? Are we entering an era where the super wealthy would just spend $2-3 million and go to space for a little loop around the orbit? Is this what we're gonna see for the next 5 years before we eventually then on Mars?
Well, so next big thing is Artemis. Artemis is from a humanity perspective, It's Artemis and obviously the Chinese equivalent trying to get men and women back on the moon, and then by the end of the decade have a semi-permanent moon base. Currently, the biggest roadblock towards that is simply spacesuits. Our spacesuits suck. That's the problem with any kind of space mission, is it just takes one thing to be delayed and the whole thing's delayed. Currently, it's spacesuits. More exciting, I think, are the deeper space missions and the efforts to send probes out into the middle of nowhere. Mars is not as exciting. We know Mars. We don't need to live on Mars. It makes more sense to live on the moon as a starting point. Get us there.
You remember that thing where Masayoshi Son was prepared to pay for some artists to go around the moon? What happened to that?
Well, I assume like any other Masayoshi Son project, the money went into the
He
drain.
threw 400 billion at it and then immediately forgot about it. To bring it back to AI, one of the most exciting things, or this is where we always have to jump between fun AI and, oh god, I hope this goes well because otherwise we'll all die AI. And as space gets more and more crowded, especially low and mid-Earth orbit get more and more crowded, to handle all the near misses and potential collisions will require very, very good management by AI systems. Unfortunately, you've got Amazon and SpaceX are currently fighting over stuff like that, and they're constantly saying, you were in a collision, no we weren't. It's very chaotic, it's poorly regulated, there aren't enough restrictions, there aren't enough fines in place for when these guys break the law. And obviously the consequences of a large collision and then the cascading collisions that come after it would be devastating to our species, our technology, and therefore our enjoyment of things like GPS and satellite TV.
Speaking of regulation, as the resident IP nerd of the pod, one thing I'm interested in vaguely is the concept of, if you are on a moon base, you're on a Mars base, and you invent something out there, you invent an AI system or whatever, you're wanting to get patent protection, you want to protect your innovation while it's out there, because technically you're protecting something in a jurisdiction. What space is not a jurisdiction? It's free to all, and in space, no one owns the moon, even though America got there first. So protection of innovation.
Yeah, we stake our flag up there.
I think that
1969.
No, you didn't. Stanley Kubrick did it. My idea, what I'm looking at is, when you put something out into space, is that still technically yours? Could I infringe your device because it's out in space? That's something that I think also, while more boring, needs to be picked up in any future regulation.
You'll have to protect it with your space shotgun, I think. That's the only way to protect things in space.
First of all, Ben, thank you for bringing this topic into the most boring angle possible. And nobody has answered to that. That's why you're an IP journalist and I'm not.
Okay, so to make it more exciting and AI based is, if we're talking about regulation and jurisdiction in space, we again haven't worked out. We have increasing regulations on data and potentially more and more regulations of what kind of things AI can look at and what it can do. If we offload some of that processing and storage to seasteading in space, is there any way to regulate that? And the answer is no. And we can regulate the nation where the ship, the rocket goes from, but again, that's incredibly hard to regulate. If one company sends computer hardware into space, and then another and rents it out to another company, and then that company processes terrible things there.
Well, it does feel like we're probably maybe 5-10 years away from like a major incident, or in space where just some crap happened or something happened. Some angry customer did something. Some angry passengers on a space trip did something stupid, and everything. And that the regulation will call up and say, "What have we done? And why haven't we looked at this 10 years ago?" And it'll be open a whole new conversation.
Keep Logan Paul away from space.
Yeah, he's gonna throw the fish at the moon temple.
No, but somebody just gonna get drunk and die in orbit. That's what it's gonna be.
Listen, when you put Americans on long trip, something terrifying will for sure happen. I wonder what the liquor selection is on one of those space.
Yeah, does the Second Amendment apply to space?
But Russians were seriously and honestly equipping their astronauts with guns because that wasn't against the guns weren't intended to fight space monsters. The guns rotated to fight wolves and bears, sort of like when they land. Eventually, it was
space.
inspired, by one episode. But there is precedent for carrying kind of solid load munitions into orbit, and I'm thinking, it's just like, if we're talking about all these things and space tourism, space drinking, space guns.
What do you want about? Space bears are real.
Yeah, I think that there's also possible that it's just become the old American West, which is all the people who are brave enough to get up there will get up there, and then they will just fight for whatever, and it will be kind of a messy situation up there. And like, I'm not gonna say 10 years. I think in 30 years, you might end up be like Ad Astra, an average movie, but how the moon is just occupied by pirates, and they were just fighting against each other because there's no laws really applied there. So
Space pirates. Space pirates.
And little baby Zealand, like leading as a band of space pirates. Yes.
right after he learned to code and get fire as a coder, he'll end up in space. Like we said at the beginning, we are back, and
we're
hopefully
bad.
you are too. Like hopefully you haven't forget about us. So, and there's a lot of stuff going on. So give us a little preview of what's happening next week for the gentleman.
Yes,
in
and
the
finally, yes. So the pandemic is truly over because enterprise events are returning, and next week we are kicking off AI Summit London. It's the first AI Summit in 2 years. So anyway, what is happening in London? We are expecting, footfall to be slightly lower than it was in 2019, but we have a fantastic program. We have lots of people from healthcare, AstraZeneca, GSK. We have people from banking. We have people from finance. I personally interviewed the CEO of eToro. They don't even do any AI. It was just an assignment because those guys said we want.
And why are you telling us this?
I will be pushing
relevant at all.
crypto at the event.
You're the worst hype man.
The London thing is happening. And Seb, what about you? I heard you're venturing 67 hours to somewhere nobody cares about.
33 hours either way. I'm going on a very exciting special secret press trip to Svalbard. So by the time you hear this, I might be on the plane regretting my life choices.
Without question, you will.
Or grounded because
we are online, or you can obviously find some of us in London AI Summit next week, but you can also obviously follow our coverage. I don't know how many video coverage there will be, but because I'm not going to be there, but in aibusiness.com, where there's a lot of stuff on there. And there's a lot of videos we shot in San Francisco a month ago that's still worth checking out if you want to see our glorious reporter, Chuck Martin, in all of his action. And you can find me online at LinkedIn or wherever social media you use at TNChifu, and you can find Max at
Max Smolax on Twitter, Facebook, all the good social networks, Instagram possibly, but mostly just write me an email.
And Ben, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn at Ben Wadecki. I'll usually be tweeting about the same old stuff, i.e. Star Trek Season 2 Picard is gonna suck.
I actually saw the trailer and it doesn't look half bad. I gotta say, I was actually
You can
somewhat impressed.
polish any turd with a trailer.
Thanks for getting your enthusiasm about Star Trek out of the way. And Seb, where can people find you?
You can't find me. I'm in Svalbard. You won't ever find me. You're never gonna catch me. You can watch me, but not find me on Twitter at SebMoss. There will be pictures. Maybe you'll get an insight of what I'm getting up to in Svalbard. It's very exciting.
And I guess, should we place bets on whether Seb is going to make it back on time? He probably will be stranded at one of the airports somewhere at some point for more than 2 days. Yeah.
I'll be going through 6 different airports. One of them will realize that I am very pro-terrorism. So.
Realize.
Cut the feed.